Hello, everyone. Welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We are on the new streamingnetwork.com, which is the home of Going Bold and Going Solo. And we want to welcome you here to our show here today. You are listening to Going Solo, Life After Relationship Loss. I am Cece Shatz, the Doyenne of Relationship Building. I am a divorce, dating, and a life coach. And I want to welcome you so much to the show. All of our wonderful information you can find right on newstreamingnetwork.com. Go to that. And we're streaming live on Roku. So those out there that watch us on Roku, we closed out last year at 6 million. I want to thank you so much for listening to us. And I hope that you'll continue. So we do appreciate you. Well, let's move on to the show. We've got a really hot show for you today. We're going to talk about relationships. And I'm really keen on relationship building. I really feel that that's something, it's kind of like an art. It's something that we need to really instill in ourselves, that we need to develop good, healthy, solid relationships with individuals. And we have the greatest person here that's going to help us with that. We have Jessica Myers. Let me bring her forward. Jessica Myers Adams, she's a relationship visionary, she's a relationship coach, and she's a therapist. And we're going to talk about what is your relationship vision today. So tell us, Jessica, how did you get into really being a relationship coach?
Hey there, Cece. Thanks so much for the welcome. Yeah, so I've been seeing couples they're at all different stages, I guess just what popped into my mind. I'll answer your question, but I just saw a couple yesterday, and I was doing what we call discernment counseling. And that's where, two people are coming in with the only goal of deciding what happens in their relationship. And that couple is still in the process of making the decision. But I think a lot of your listeners could probably relate to these folks that come in and do discernment, and one of their partner makes the decision that the relationship is over. So relationships are absolutely important to me. And the reason that I became a couples therapist was when I fell in love. I was actually on a completely different trajectory. I knew I wanted to serve. I was actually studying in the ministry field. And then I fell in love and decided that I couldn't give myself to support a church or something like that. So that was 15 years ago. And now here I am. And with making that choice, you think everything's going to be wonderful in a relationship, but it's not. It's only the first honeymoon stage that's really wonderful. And so as I started studying to be a couples therapist and getting expertise in that field, my relationship was really suffering. Even though I would be sitting with a couple and telling them what to do, I was having my own struggle. And I really became obsessed with figuring out what are the principles, what are the things that need to happen in order to build relationships. And through the years, I have now started to do coaching, because coaching is sometimes more powerful than even therapy. We can get results quicker. So I could go on, I could give you my whole, resume, but I will tell you this, I'm really obsessed with helping people have good relationships, whether that's with their family, with their partner, with their boss. All relationships matter.
Yes, a lot of us are moving forward from a relationship loss, and we're starting to build friendships with individuals, not only, just casually, right? But then we're also thinking, I'd like to maybe have another partner in my life. And so you start doing the dating, and you start doing those kind of things, and you realize what you did before isn't working, not exactly what it is that you want, which is why I thought, let's talk about a relationship vision, because so often people, when I ask them about dating all the time, I say, well, what are you looking for? They have no clue. They'll be saying, okay, well, I'm looking for someone that's, this height, blonde hair or brown hair, or someone that has these particular interests or things like that. But they really don't have a goal as to what they really want. Do they want marriage? Do they want someone to live with? Do they want what? What do they want?
Right. Well, I'll tell you one of the secret things to being in a successful relationship. The successful people cultivate a relationship with themselves first, right? And so when I was looking for my soulmate, my life partner, I had a mentor, and she told me to do two things. One, she told me to write a list of all the things that I wanted. So it's great you're saying that. Like, what are the things that were really important? Because when I didn't have much self-esteem and I didn't have that, and I was, coming from really broken relationships, because that is my history. I wrote that in I'm very open about those things, but I came from a really traumatic, experience before getting healthy. And so my list was so primitive that I wanted my partner to have a license to go to get some education. Like, I started to write down those things, but I had this list and I hung on to that list until I met my now partner and, was able to check off that list. So that was the first thing that this mentor said is get very clear on what kind of relationship you want to be in, what kind of person. I wanted somebody who respected their family, who had a good relationship with them, because that was important to me. I wanted them to be open to have a dog, these kind of things, but it was a very extensive list. Mm-hmm. The second thing that woman told me to do was, she said to start dating myself, which sounded weird, but I imagine you talk about this all the time when we're healing. It's being comfortable in our own skin. And so going out to eat and sitting there by myself felt really awkward, at first. But by the time that I was ready and primed for the relationship, I did this walk. I went to Spain. It's part of my healing journey. I actually did the Camino de Santiago. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I have a friend that actually did that. Yeah.
So I started in France and I walked to Spain. It was about 500 miles to do that, and was really a journey, to find who I was and those things. Anyway, when I got to the end, and I'd done all the primitive things because I didn't stay in nice hotels or anything. I got a really nice hotel. I took myself out to dinner. I lit candles in the room and had, a bubble bath and all of those things. And it was like a date by myself. So I remember that. So that's the secret, is to have a really strong sense of what you want and be comfortable with who you are in preparation.
I'm sorry, I'm coughing. I do apologize for that, but my sinuses. But I agree with that. And so often when I talk to individuals, right, they often allude to their relationship that wasn't joyful, right? And so they kind of have lost their joy, right? Mm-hmm. And so the reality is we are the ones that are in charge of our joy, right? We're in charge of what makes us happy. And so often when we're thinking about stepping forward into another relationship, we think about all those times that we were unhappy. But the reality is if we don't start moving forward and knowing what makes us happy, finding our joy again, with those type of things, that we're going to be in the same place over and over again, right? Because it isn't the other person that controls that. It's us that controls that. So tell us a little bit about that, like, trying to step out of the box a little bit and maybe doing other things and finding out what truly does make you happy.
Yeah, well, I think with a lot of people who go from relationship to relationship, and that feels good, and I totally understand that, and I can raise my hand and attest to that before you get to a place when that doesn't work anymore, or some people do, and I got to that place. And I think what happens when we start to step out, we'll be confronted with something that is very scary, because a part of us wants to explore, a part of us wants to do that. And then there's another part of us, because of our experiences in the past, is going to have a lot of difficulty with that. And behind me, I have in my office here, I have two chairs, mm-hmm. and I'll often have my clients acknowledge that there's two parts of them, and there really is a battle going on within them, because there's this part that aspires to take action, and then there's another part that will say yes but, and that will have fear. And I respect the yes but part 100%, but I think getting to know that part of ourselves and asking, what is it that is preventing me from stepping out? What is it that is preventing me from taking this risk? So I think we have to acknowledge that inner struggle. And I'll give you an example. Like, I'm supposed to be doing PT exercises, and there is a part of me that knows I want to do them. I am, I need to get back to doing the things that I love to do. And then this other part creeps in and it says, you don't need to do those. You're feeling fine today, right? It's that other part. Anytime we want to grow or stretch, the other part, the alter ego steps in, and we have to address that. So I think that's one of the things. And then they say fear is overcome by walking through it, right? Like you have to walk through the fear, and it is very scary. So I think it's taking little risks that you think you can be successful with, and maybe even getting 2 chairs out and having a conversation with yourself. I really recommend that. You can even do it on paper. There's the part of me that wants to and the part of me that doesn't, because there's nothing, Cece, that you could tell me that will make me do it. In fact, if you say this is what you should do, I will dig in my heels more. So just as a note to all of our, friends listening, and myself included, I need this reminder that I can't tell anyone what to do. It just will make them, do the opposite.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm the same way. If someone tells me I can't do something, you better watch me do it. So right. It's absolutely right. But I think a lot of us, as we're moving through, the loss, we start to want to develop partnerships, new partnerships, and get out there and meet people. And so that's why I thought it was so important, because you deal a lot with couples. And so I think we do have a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges, I think, as we move forward, trying to develop into new relationships. We're at a different place in our lives. Of course, we have that, that baggage, and anyone that says you're not going to have baggage in your life when you're in your 50s, 60s, you're going to have it. I mean, that's life. That's just the way life is. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to interrupt your life. And so that's the biggest thing. But we are going to have challenges as we move forward and as we start connecting, and we're connecting new lives together. So any advice can you give us for that, once we're stepping out?
Yeah, well, I think, my mentor, my mentor for couples work, she talked to me and the people that I was learning with about, how we know we're ready for a relationship. And she said that there's 2 things that are necessary, or I would say there's 2 things that are necessary for a relationship. One is knowing what you think, what you feel, what you desire. That's necessary. And that can be in any relationship. And I'll give an example of a non-romantic relationship, but knowing what you think, feel, and believe is really important. And then when you communicate with someone, knowing how that lands for them. How do they experience that? In fact, I just read an article because I was doing a blog post, and it said that Harvard did a research project, and they said that 9 out of 10 conversations fail. And they said that what you communicate to the other person is not the same as what they hear 9 out of 10 times. And they gave 10 tips, and I love them because they're actually the things that are principles for communication that I totally buy into. So we need to know what we think, feel, and believe in order to be in that relationship. And coming from a past relationship that you took on the likes and thoughts of the other person, it can be really challenging to know what you think and feel. In fact, I was working with some therapists, it was probably last year now. And there was a woman who was presenting a case, and she couldn't figure out how to break through with this couple. The woman, they were purchasing a new home, and the woman would not share what she thought about the new home. She wouldn't say what color she liked or anything like that. And so all these therapists were weighing in. They said, well, why don't you tell her to text her husband? Why don't you tell her to write it down? Why don't you, all of these things? And I sat back and I was like, that's not going to work. I don't think that it is because she's afraid to tell her husband, although that could be true. But I think we have to even take a step back. What was going on was she didn't know what she thought or felt. She didn't even know what she liked. She was so used to just doing what he wanted her to do or what she thought would make him happy that she had totally lost herself. And so what I suggested and what the therapist ended up doing was telling the woman to maybe look at some magazines and start to see how she felt when she was looking at these things. Did these things appeal to her? And then after she does step 1, we could worry about the problem that will be inevitable of step 2. It will be very challenging then for her to tell him. So he'd have to be working on being a safe, person to talk to, because I think it's like 70, maybe it's more than that, 70% of what we think and feel is shown before we even say anything. So the husband could be standing there with his arms crossed, and it's very scary for her to say anything. So he would have to really prep himself to almost be inviting, right? So the long answer to your question, like how do we start to know what we like? Sometimes we have to start at the very beginning, because what if you don't know at all? You've put everything into your family, your husband, your kids, and now you're left with, well, what do I like? I think it's starting to just say, let me look at some things and see, how do I feel? What happens in my body when I'm looking at these pictures? I recently learned how to scuba dive, and it was like, I hadn't done that. Some people learned earlier, but what excites you? Does that make you a little excited, or does that terrify you? There's some people that are, no way am I going to go scuba diving.
Yeah. Well, often I say the same thing. Is like many people that are coming from a relationship loss, they're so, especially the women and even some of the men, they've always wanted to please their partner. And so they've just kind of lost themselves within that environment. And so they, again, don't know what it was that makes them happy. And so I often say to them, we'll think back at the time when you were happy doing like whatever. What did you do that made you happy? And I have so many individuals that will go back to when they were like young and in high school or whatever, or maybe they had like an art that they always wanted to pursue that they never did, because they got married and whatever. And so many of them have gone into like being painters and sculptors. And I had one lady that's an actress, and one gentleman that's a comedian now. And it's like, so many different things that they just kind of put on a shelf because they were so busy focusing on, the family and providing what they needed to provide and do what they needed to do, that they kind of lost themselves along the way. And I felt the same way. I mean, I was so used to always pleasing, doing, that I forgot what makes me happy, what I enjoy. And and so you had to, so it's really, I hate to say it, but sometimes it's when we look at our lives right now as we're moving through building our new life, it's kind of exciting because, if you stop for a minute, it's your choice, right? It's your choice of what you want to do and how you want to do it. And so it's all, it's kind of a building block, and it can be a wonderful thing, and you can move those blocks. So if you start in a path and a direction that you find, this isn't really working for me, then you just move the block, and go in a little bit different direction. So it can be extremely exciting and very pleasurable. And to think that you can become friends and build relationships with people along the way, and really have a new whole life with a whole, different arena of people, different walks of life is very, very fulfilling, very, very exciting indeed. And who knows what that's going to bring you, what kind of partner that will step forward, and, that kind of thing.
I think it can be, I think it is exciting, but we don't always know it's exciting. And
True.
Sometimes we have to even prep ourselves to be excited. And I used to think that was, I don't know, Pollyannery. What is it? How do you say that word, right? Like to just say you're positive. And there is a word for that. And I'm very careful about this, but I'll tell you, I've heard this word toxicity going around. But in regards to positivity, there's research that actually names being positive by just faking it as toxic positivity, right? So we don't want someone just to pretend they're excited, but there are actual things you can do to get yourself excited that is real positivity. And I'll give you an example because I sometimes try these things, believe it or not, but I was coming back from California last week and my flight was delayed. And in the morning, I had plans to go to the beach. and I couldn't do that. And so now I have, instead of 2 flights, 3 flights. And I was sitting on the plane already disappointed, right? Because I had, it was my last day of this conference. I was going to go do some things. And I looked down at my phone and it said, your earbuds are at gate A5. And I looked out the window. Oh man, there's no way you can get off a plane once you're on the plane. And talk about negativity. I was basically a toxic pot sitting there, right? Just stewing. Like, now I have 3 hours for my first flight that I can't listen to anything. And I thought of, what are the principles of positive psychology? You can research positive psychology. There's a lot of tools. And what it says is not to just pretend you're positive, like, oh, yay, I get to sit on the plane for 3 hours, but instead to start thinking about the things that are legitimately going well. Well, I got out my phone and I made a note of simply a gratitude list of the things that were going well. Okay, so I don't have my AirPods, they're outside, but I am able to get a new pair. I have the money, I'm financially able to do that. You know, I was able to go on this trip to learn some new skills. That's great. You know, I started to list out these things that that were genuinely positive and the reasons why. I think sometimes gratitude lists don't cut it because they don't have the end part of the because, right? So if you're saying, I'm really grateful that I have my health, it's like everybody should have that, right? There's a should in that. But if you could say, I'm really grateful that I have my health because there are a lot of people who can't get out of bed, or, you know, it sort of amplifies it. So I think the idea of looking for the good in things, not in that way that's fake, but really can get you towards that excitement. So I think that's a place to build that lower frequency and build it up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think you have to home in. You have to home in on it, you know, and really know what it is about it that is good. And I do agree with you about the gratitude list. I think it's a great way to kind of, you know, I usually tell individuals, to fill your own well first, right? You know, read good books, listen to music that's positive, and, you know, do different things that you know that makes you happy, you know, that kind of thing. And so you just keep filling your well, and eventually, you know, you'll be in that space, you know, you'll be in that positive space. So it's something that you just have to do. But so now we're going to be moving forward into a relationship with someone, and we've struggled, you know, through, you know, past relationships. We've struggled with maybe some new dating, you know, just things that didn't work out in the dating arena, right? And we meet somebody that we're kind of thinking, you know, this person's kind of interesting. So any advice as to how we can kind of move ourselves into that new relationship?
Yeah, absolutely.
Broad, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think Ellen Bader wrote a book, Tell Me No Lies. And it's interesting because it is about getting into a relationship. And what she says is, from the beginning, you can be mindful that you don't embellish or lie to this new person, because that's what actually sets us up for more of a challenge when the honeymoon stage is over. Because the truth is, the honeymoon stage ends for us all, right? And so once the honeymoon stage ends and we want to go back to some of the things we already enjoyed, if we've told our partner, I love to watch football, I love to go to antique stores, right? Like, you know, those things, we want to be careful that we're not doing that. I think that's first. Don't lose yourself in that process. You're very curious and your partner is really going to give you, and this is the tricky thing, it feels like unconditional love. So you can take advantage of that and not fall into the place where you are making up things that aren't necessarily true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've heard that from guys all the time. They always say, well, she said she liked to watch football, but then after we got, you know, married or whatever, she won't watch it.
Yeah, right. So those things in the beginning can set you up for better success. And you can tell them, you probably do love being with them, no matter what you're watching or whatever you're doing. You know, there's really an infatuation period that happens. And it's so, I just get excited thinking about new relationships because they are the closest thing we get to feeling like we should have been treated when we were little and got unconditional love. Like that partner, now there's, we're still going to have little spats maybe in the honeymoon phase, but they're really curious about you. They want to know about you. You can stay up all night and talk. So all of those things are, I just want to revisit that for a second. The honeymoon stage is amazing. But I think after, where I focus for people, where I focus my work and help people is after that stage, because no one's coming to see probably either of us when they're in that euphoria, they're excited. Their work isn't as bright as the relationship. Everything is dull, right? So it's after that period that is inevitable that everyone falls victim to. I don't know if that's the word, I think, because it's a really tragedy when that ends. And there is a period of reassembly. So I think of it, and I don't know if people will be able to listen, I'll describe what I'm doing, but you have your two hands, right? They enmesh to become one person. Like there's the version of we love football. We do this, we do that. And after the honeymoon stage, you can imagine that collapses and you have your two hands are separate again. And you want to put them back where they're two separate entities, right? And when the honeymoon collapses and you're trying to reassemble into two different people, there's this period where, and research says that everyone goes through this period of trying to figure out like, well, it should be my way. What should be my way? Or completely avoiding those things that cause conflict. Conflict is necessary, right? Mm-hmm. And so after you're through that honeymoon stage, or when you've been in this place where you're still stuck in limbo, so many couples can be stuck in limbo for 10 or 20 years because they don't really start to understand there's two different perspectives. There's the me perspective and there's the you perspective. So I'm going to get to the how do you create a relationship vision, but I think we have to first understand these pieces, that there's me and then there's me talking to you. So let me check in, because then I'll be doing this right now in live time. What do you think, or what is that? What do you make of that, Cece, as I'm talking about that?
What do I think when there's me?
There's is it making sense that there's got to be the three entities, I guess I would say. There's mm-hmm. me, there's you, and then there's the relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think like when you were saying that when you're talking to someone, you have your perspective of the conversation that you're doing. They have their perspective, and then you have reality. So it's like, okay, so how are we gonna move forward with this type of thing? And I do realize that a lot of relationships do that stall out, and I've experienced it myself. I mean, in a relationship, it seems like I have a 3-year thing. So I'm with someone for 3 years and it's like stalls out. It just, Well,
that makes actually a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm going to analyze you, but I can tell you with folks who do have that experience of 2 to 3 years and it gets stuck, is because they may not be able to successfully move into the second stage of the relationship. And that may not be the you problem, but it's a problem for the relationship, in that when the first stage is the we stage and the second stage, to use this like psychobabble term, but there is a term, it's differentiation. And differentiation is the process of being able to say what you think, feel, and believe, and allowing for there to be a difference in the other person, what they think, feel, and believe. So this process of differentiation is the second stage, and it's what will connect the relationship through the lifetime. Because if I know what I think and I know what you think, we can start to resolve things. We could start to have dialogue about those things. So I call it a different word because it makes a little bit more sense, and it's for me it fits. I call it love consciousness. And what I mean by that is I love myself enough to not criticize you, to not try to change you, to not do those things. So that's me. And then I also have a love conscious attitude in our conversation to know, what do you think? It doesn't mean I agree with what you think, but it means that I'm going to be quiet enough to listen and try to understand it. So that's that process that is necessary to take the relationship to the next level and to be in a healthy place. So what I think the vision is not about what I want and not about what you want, but about what is best for both of us. And I can talk about how you get to that process, but I think that is the vision that I like to think of for my relationship. And I fall short every single day, but it's can I raise my relationship goal to elevate the purpose of the relationship to be priority, not just me or not just my partner. So I can say more about that, but I wanted to stop and pause there for you.
That is excellent. That is excellent, because I do believe that that's where a lot of people do that stall out, is because they're focusing on what they want, and they maybe don't always understand what the other partner wants, but they're not focusing on the whole relationship in a whole. What can we do to make it better? How can we move forward together? And so often it's like, well, what I want, I'm not gonna, and I fell victim to this myself. So I mean, I totally get it. I mean, I'm not perfect, and but this is why we have you on the show, is so we learn.
Well, we're all not.
I think, we go.
Yeah. Cece, I think there's 3 categories that I definitely can pick mine, and maybe we can have fun with it. I'll tell you, these are the 3 dysfunctional categories that prevent us from getting there. The first is resentful compliance. Resentful compliance means that I am suspending what I want, and sometimes I grumble or I say it, but I go along with what you want in order to preserve the relationship. That is definitely not mine. The second category is feeling forgotten. There's this real focus on yourself, and you feel like the other person has forgot about you. You tend to come across as very critical and frustrated, because you think you're being very clear about what you think and what you want. And you may even say, I want you to be more affectionate, or sense, because it's not specific enough, but I could come back to that. So the second category that would be really ineffective is the feeling forgotten. And what is lacking in that is the understanding of what your partner is thinking or feeling, because they may not be doing something at you. They may not have the capacity to do something. They may not understand. There's so many things, right? So those are the first 2. Does those make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then the third one is sort of a catch-all. I think it is just the disconnected. And for people who are disconnected, maybe they start drinking, maybe they start working, maybe they start doing something else to put their head in the sand, and they don't really have a sense of what they want, and they don't really know what their partner wants. They're just in this place of kind of numbing so that they don't have to feel, because it is really painful. All 3 of those are very painful if you are, when you're experiencing them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes too, when you have that numbing, that distancing, sometimes it comes back from before, it comes back from your past. And if you had some difficulties in your relationships before, then you just, you kind of bring that forward, and you behave in that. You have that same pattern where you just kind of disconnect, And so we've got to be very careful when things are happening. When we see things happening in our relationships, we have to kind of ask ourselves, is this something, am I being triggered again? Is this something that's happened in my past? Because if it is, that it's up to you to correct that. It's up to you to get the help, go to a therapist or someone like you, Jessica, to try to talk some of these things through, so that you can come together as a couple. And I love this. I love everything we're talking about. It's absolutely terrific. I mean, I've experienced a lot of things that you've mentioned, and I just feel like there are many, many people out there that are probably experiencing the same. And so I do believe that, we can move forward in a relationship, and having someone like yourself, to talk these things through is very, very important.
I think when you have the North Star of the relationship being primary, and I can tell you that was an experience for me. It wasn't something that I made up. Actually, I was really aware of these, well, I'll call these 3 categories, right? Because the 4th category, the successful category, is that both perspectives are represented. There's so many things that can go wrong with that, but meaning that I can say what I think and feel, and then I stop and I ask, actually, I think you should go backwards. I think you should say, what do you think and feel? Is there anything else you want me to know about this? You ask 100 questions. You don't weigh in. And so okay, now I've got Cece's perspective. And then I would say, can I tell you my perspective? And so both of those things are represented. And then you can start to see whose desire is more important. I would give it like a simple explanation would be, if yours is a 9 out of 10, what you want, and mine is a 9 out of 10, well, then we're in a little bit of trouble, but we can still ask more questions. It's about getting to the place where we find out, oh, Cece, yours is a 9.1 and mine is a 9.0. Well, if mine is a 9.0 and I'm going to make the sacrifice for you, I'm going to be really disappointed, and that's okay. I'm going to do it because I want to, because I think yours is the thing that's more important. And you're going to probably acknowledge that my loss is hurtful to me. And then we're going to choose that. So that's the end result of what being a relationship visionary is, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, I had these concepts in mind. I knew that there was myself and my spouse. And we had done a lot of work, because I told you that I had some trouble in my own relationship. And I was I thought I was really healthy when I met what would be my wife. I had done a lot of work. I had been not dating for almost 7 years. In fact, I would date a little bit, but I wouldn't commit or call anyone, I wouldn't say you're my boyfriend or you're my girl. I wouldn't do any of those things. And I felt like my emotions were very in control. Well, fast forward to a year later, when the honeymoon starts to crumble and I'm peeling out of my driveway and I'm, really not proud of my behavior. We talked, I think before, and I told you my book is What to Do When You Do Give a Fuck. And I hope that word is okay, because we were talking about that. And in that book, I talk about trying to pull a tree out of the ground, just being so, emotional. That's when you are dealing with your past stuff. All my old stuff got triggered. But we had worked, I had worked really good to get through that. And a couple of years ago, this was before the relationship visionary idea came into effect, I got into a fight with my wife, and we both said some just, we didn't call names. We were just like, oh, this is bull, blah, blah, blah. Those really horrible moments. And I walked into my other room, and I know that I need to get calm. You need to calm your nervous system when you're in that kind of fight, and you need to take a break. And I took a break, and I put my head in my hands, and I was thinking, like, what is this about? Like, what happened? I kept thinking, I didn't do anything wrong. In fact, I still don't think I did anything wrong. And what I did was I turned on a meditation. I thought, well, this will help me. And I started listening to this meditation with the mindset, I didn't do anything wrong. And this, his name is Sadhguru, was doing a talk, not a meditation, but I just kept listening. I need something to clear my mind. And maybe you talked about your listeners, maybe they can listen to music and do things. This is one of the things that helps me, is to listen to talks, anything that will change the channel. So I was listening to Sadhguru, and he was talking with this woman about volunteers. He said, you can't tell volunteers what to do. Right. You have to just accept them the way they are. And he said, one of the things though, that a volunteer does is they have a higher purpose. They are a visionary. And a visionary is a person who thinks about the solution, what's at the end, and they don't get caught up into what's going on now. And I was listening to this and I was like, oh, I'm so caught up into what's going on right now. I lost my North Star. My North Star is the relationship. It's not me, and it's not, trying to make sure that my spouse is okay. It's about the relationship. And something clicked for me in that moment. And I was able to, be even more calmer, I suppose. And also know that now is not the right time to talk about it. Because if the relationship is the most important thing, then my partner's desire to not talk about anything right now is more important than mine at this moment. And later, mine might be more important, where we talk about it. And I think that was the key turning point, right? Is having that North Star. And I could give you one other example of that too, of the North Star. I was listening to a talk, and there was a guy talking about NASCAR drivers. I'm not a big NASCAR fan, but he said he was interviewing one of the big time champions, millionaire race car drivers. And he said, how do you think you're so successful? And the race car driver said, well, whenever you get into one of those skirmishes, and I don't know what they call them, where you're all around all these cars around you and you're afraid you're going to wreck, the thing that you need to do is you need to pick a focal point that's ahead of you. And what happens is your hands will automatically go to that focal point and you will be able to avoid the crash. And so I think it's having a focal point, having a North Star, or being a relationship visionary, right? That's how I think of those things.
Oh, wonderful information. I tell you what, we're going to have to close the show here, but I could go on and talk to you forever. So I'd love to have you come back on again, because I really do feel that, as we progress in relationship building, that we do need some help along the way, and understanding our North Star. So I think that that's important. So I want to make sure that we give everyone the information so that they can reach you. Now, the book that she's written is What Do You Do When You Give a Fuck? Is that it? What do you do when you give a fuck? Can you find that on Amazon?
You can, yes.
Okay, so go right to Amazon and get that. Of course, her name is Jessica Myers Adams. You can look that up on Amazon under the author, and you'll be able to find it. And then here's her website. So check it out. So Couples Speak. That's COUPLES, and then Speak, SPEAK.com. So check out our website. If you're looking to build a relationship, or let's say you're into a relationship and you have a potential partner, you guys are trying to work it out, it doesn't hurt to actually talk to someone along the way and really make sure that you're focusing on the relationship and that you're both, doing well in it with regards to, understanding where you are. Because I think with today's world, things are shifting so quickly that I think it's very, very important that we know that we have somebody in our corner. So definitely go to couplespeak.com, reach out to Jessica Myers Adams. She's a relationship visionary, a relationship coach, and she's a therapist. She can help you through some of this and making sure that you keep your North Star, bright and clear in front of you. So I want to thank you so much, Jessica, for being on the show.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
It is great having you. Any last closing words you'd like to add?
I loved how you ended that. I think keep your North Star real shiny. I might use that. Thank you so much for that. That was great.
Sure. You'll get the bill in the mail. No, I'm kidding. No, it is truly good. I think that you were so right on everything that you've said. You're so, really tapped into what I think is going on with relationships today. And so it is difficult. It's not, when you're blending, families, you're blending two people together, there's our issues that are going to come up. There's arise, and you want to be able to balance that. And so I really do feel like your work is definitely needed. So thank you for doing all that you do. So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So again, go to couplespeak.com and go and buy our book, What to Do When You Give a Fuck. We hope that you'll just go to Amazon and pick that book up. Again, this is Cece Shatz. You're listening to Going Solo Life After Relationship Loss. And I am the Doyenne of Relationship Building. I'm a divorce, dating, and a life coach. You're listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, newsstreamingnetwork.com, home of Going Solo and Going Bold. We want to thank you for joining us each and every time, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.